due to certain challenges, which is inevitable sometimes in Africa. We just have to continue managing. So thank you, and you are welcome to the second training for today, referred to as Module 2. Today, we are moving straight into qualitative data analysis. You will recall that yesterday, we tried to understand what qualitative is all about. Yesterday was basically an introduction to know what qualitative is all about. Now we are moving into the analysis. How can we carry out analysis in qualitative? What are the things we need to know before we begin to do the analysis? In the next days, today we're going to talk about the analysis, the process, the thing we need to know. Then if we are able to finish the touch on the coding today, then we move in on the software tomorrow. If we are unable to finish the coding today, we start the coding tomorrow, then the other part, we join the software tomorrow. And next tomorrow also, we are going to be on the software. The last day will be on how can we report whatever we have analyzed, whatever we have coded. So that will be the last day. So today, as I've said, we are moving into qualitative data analysis. When we talk about qualitative, there are some challenges that are generally known with qualitative. And what are those challenges? Limitation of samples. These challenges, these problems are what scholars usually use to rate qualitative analysis. But now, just as we discussed yesterday, we now have process, we now have step, we now have strategy that can be used to ensure that these challenges, this problem did not affect our analysis. So briefly, the challenges are usually identified with qualitative data analysis are limited sample size. Yes, the sample is limited, the sample is small, the sample is not as big, large as quantitative, but the small sample has limits also. If we want to select, you will recall yesterday that the minimum when it comes to dealing with populace is 20. It shouldn't be less than 20. Even if it is some design in qualitative like grounded theory, it shouldn't be less than 40. That is the rule. So the limitation of sample size used to be the problem, but now scholars have identified the appropriate sample that we can use for different types of qualitative analysis, qualitative data collection. So the sampling bias is another limitation, is another problem that are usually identified with qualitative data analysis. And what is sampling bias? The question is that in the course of doing sample, qualitative researcher is given a kind of mandate, a kind of authority to decide how to select the sample, and which is purposive, to decide who to select as the sample. This is necessary because qualitative research is a kind of research that is trying to look at deep meaning, that is trying to look at how people who are concerned feel about the issue we are looking at. So it is not about a questionnaire. It is not about random sampling. It is about going for specific person that fits for the research. So this has been proven to be not necessarily a challenge because that is the nature of a qualitative research. Even in some design in quantitative, like like empirical, like experimental, experimental in quantitative, also go for specific people who are to be used as the case that will be studied, that will be verified. So that is no more a problem. Then self-selection bias is the process of selecting people who are particularly who particularly have answer to the questions the researcher want to ask. So this is believed, according to some scholars, that it is a limitation. But with all the strategies that are put in place, they are no longer limitation. You remember yesterday we said one of the strategies to ensure reliability of the data is to ensure that the data collection are variation in data collection. That is ensuring that all people that are necessary are picked up, are selected, are part of sample. Then observation bias, that if the approach is to do observation, whether participant observation or non-participant observation, the belief is that when the researcher is doing a participant observation, where the researcher is in the midst of those he wants to study, that their countenance, their attitude, their behavior may change because of his presence. But scholars, that researchers that know what he wants, can blend with the participants, can blend with the people, the samples, without changing their behavior. So, and that is why sometimes non-participant observation is recommended, where you will observe your subject without them knowing that you're observing them. So this also can be ensured. Then validity and reliability, we talked about that yesterday. So now, going straight to the data analysis process. After we have collected the data, the next thing for us to do is to transcribe. That is the first thing after the collection of data. We transcribe whatever we have collected. And when we say transcribing, we all know what it means. That is bringing the video or audio recording to text, converting them to words on paper for easy analysis, for easy coding. So once that is done, then it comes the process of identifying. You see feed note here. Feed note is part of what we need for the analysis. We said yesterday that when you are at the feed, you should be able to track down other non-verbal communication that is coming from the respondent. So feed notes is one of the means of getting information for the analysis. So once that is done, then the analysis move to the stage of coding, analyzing the data. And the first thing in doing the analysis is to sort and classify the data. That is, you have different informants, different participants, or different respondents. So if there are 20, the sorting out and classifying the data means you're supposed to separate each of the answers from each person, then name it in the way you want to recognize each of the participants. For instance, the first person, rather than mentioning his name, you can code him by, let's assume John is his name. You can name it John 1. If the second participant or respondent or informant is William, you can name the data W2. That is data number 2, but from W, to hide the identity. So you continue like that until you sort out all the data of the people you have classified. Because sorting out the data into different files based on the source is necessary, because that will be required by the time you are importing those data into the software. Or even if it is manual or traditional analysis, classification into different sources will be required for easy analysis. So then coding will begin. We have 3 different types of coding. Coding is the process of identifying the answers given by the sources. In the course of coding, each statement by the source that you read that is relevant or that is answering your question, you'll be noting it and tie it down with a word or phrase to represent that statement. A whole paragraph, a whole sentence, or a whole page can be coded with 1 or 2 words as a way of classifying it. So I said we have different types of coding, basically 3 types of coding, which are expected from researcher. The first one is referred to as open coding. By open coding means you are picking the work, that the interview that you have transcribed, you are picking them one by one. Picking them one by one, you will be reading through. When you are reading through, you'll be identifying what they are saying that are meaningful, and you'll be giving it word. This thing I'm explaining, by God's grace, somebody said he can't see the PowerPoint. Are you not seeing the PowerPoint? Please let me know if you are not seeing it. Are you seeing the PP now?
Yes, we are seeing. I'm seeing. One of
Okay.
the others.
Okay. Thank you. So which means that when you are doing open coding, you are doing a general coding. This coding I'm explaining to you, we are going to demonstrate it theoretically, then we are going to demonstrate it practically again when we get to the usage of the software. But we have to do it outside the software first so that you can understand by the time we get to the software. That's why I have to take it outside the software first. So the first coding is open coding, which is the general process of identifying the answers to the question you ask. This question you have taken to the field are referred to as protocol. So answer to these questions, you remember, will be the answer to your research question or the answer to your objective. So the first step of identifying the answers is to begin the open coding, doing general coding of the material. Look at what the person is giving as the answer, read through several times, then give it a code, give it a short statement that will represent that statement. Then when you do open coding for all the materials you have, all the files you have from different sources, when you have done general coding, then you now move to the second coding, which is referred to as the ASHIA coding. That is the second level of coding. This level of coding is the process of collapsing, process of joining together codes that you have done that are related, that are similar. Join them together as you are seeing them. Any code you see up that you have done, maybe towards the end of the file of the material, you see another code you have made that is similar to the first one you did. So you bring them together, collapsing them, joining them together because they are related. That is what they mean by ASHIA coding. Sometimes you can begin to read again to look for more code you have mixed out during the open coding. So you begin to do the second coding, which is ASHIA, trying to collate, trying to join together all the codings you have done that are related. Then once you are done with that, you do the selective coding. Selective coding is the last stage of coding, which is the process of bringing all the codes that are related that you have joined together at the second level, bringing them together to form a pattern, to form a theme, to form meaning. Each, for instance, your study may require, maybe you have 2 objectives that you are setting out to achieve. The 2 objectives, from the 2 objectives, you have set out some questions that you have taken to the field to ask your respondent. So when you have done the first coding, the second coding, you have joined those ones that are related. At the level of the selective coding, it means you are now collapsing all codes that are related but different. They are related by virtue of a certain thing. You are joining them together under a theme. That theme is like a pattern. Maybe, for instance, your objective number 1 is to know the impact of climate change on certain society. Impact of climate change, maybe in certain society in Kenya, Ghana, or Rwanda. So now you have gone to the field, you've asked them, and in the course of your coding, you discover that they have given different kinds of impact. Maybe the impact on earth status of the community, maybe the impact on the agricultural status of the community, maybe impact on the water system of that community. So we have three level of coding at that. Some said the impact is on health, some said the impact is on agriculture, some said the impact is on water. So it is at the level of selective coding that you will now group all statements that are related to water, impact on water. You group them under water. You are going to bring all codes that's related to impact on agriculture. You group them together. Then another one, impact on health of the community. You group them together. So we have three different kind of coding now, which you have identified. So these three, bringing them together under a team is what we call selective. All these three, agriculture, water, and health problem, those are the three categories of impact they have identified. So you are now grouping these three together under impact of climate change. So impact of climate change will now be the theme under which we discuss impact on agriculture, impact on health, impact on water. So that is what they call selective coding. If another question you have taken to the field maybe is to know the solution to the problem of climate change, the solution can come from, maybe some of them agree that factory factory that are emitting smoke need to be relocated. Maybe that is the solution some are giving. Maybe some are saying the solution is for government to support the health facility of the community so that the impact of that climate change will not be felt when government support them. Government is providing clean water. That becomes a solution. If the impact cannot be removed, there will continue to be company. If company are closed, many people will lose their job. So to solve the problem, let government come in to assist. So if that's the second objective you want to know the solution, and they have profile solution. So these three solutions too, this solution they have profile, when you are reading, you are doing open coding, you'll be identifying the solution based on any point or any paragraph or at any page you have seen it. You'll be identifying them. So when you are done with that, second level actual coding, you collate them, those that are related to uh, support health services, those that are related to close companies that are creating pollution problem. So our governments should come up with a strong rule regarding the company that are contributing to the problem of climate change. So the selective coding, all these suggestions they are giving as the solution, you will collate them again together under one theme, which is under selective. You collate them together under one theme. So meaning that all the sources that say something about close down company as the solution, you bring all their answers, you group them together as one. All those who said, well, we cannot close company, but government can support by improving its facility so that the impact will not be felt so much. You will group those who said that as a one solution. Then the other one is government should provide clean water. Maybe once they have alternative water, they won't bother about stream water again, which has been polluted. So all these are related to, you group them together. So don't forget that the first grouping we did was to the first objective. What are the impacts? We have gone to the field to know the impact, and they have told us the impact. So we transcribe the work. In the course of reading through, reading the work, we've come across certain statements that signify the impact, and we have collated them, we have grouped them under a team to form a pattern. What is the pattern? Impact of climate change is felt on water, earth facility, and agriculture. So we have identified that. The second pattern we have created, which we derive from the document, we derive from the interview, is that the solution. And from the findings, we have discovered three solutions. coming from all the 20 participants. So when looking at the interview, we'll be coming across this solution at different points of the interview. Even there is a question you ask not relating to the solution. Somebody may mention the solution there. You go and bring the solution wherever you identify it, collate them together, let them form a pattern too. The pattern now is that we have the impact, under which we have three categories of impact. We have the solution, under which we have three categories of solution, or two categories, or it may be four different solution profiled by the sources. So we are going to group all this. So the process of doing this is what they call coding. Coding is the process of identifying answers as said by the sources to the objective, to the question we have taken to the field. So once that is done, then we begin to interpret. We begin to interpret. So this coding can be done both in the software as well as in a manual or traditional way. We are talking about software now. We are moving to software. But before we use software, we need to understand how this coding, how this process was carried out when traditional method was the only option available for people. For instance, as much as there are software now to do the coding, to do the analysis, some people are still using traditional method to do qualitative analysis because number one, maybe due to lack of access to the software, maybe due to lack of knowledge on how to use the software, or maybe due to the fact that the data are not so much, maybe just a small data. Maybe you just interview 5 people, 10 people, and you felt that this data is not much. Uh, you can easily analyze them. So those are the three reasons that can necessitate the use of a traditional method of qualitative analysis. So when we talk about traditional method, this is the process. This is the process in which you are doing the analysis, coding. That's the first coding, open coding. The second coding, partial coding. The third coding, selective coding. You do it manually too, but software makes it easy. The software makes it possible not to lose any data. Then the software also help you to get model. That's the graphical model of your findings. Just as we normally get the model when we are running our data on SPSS. SPSS can give us table, SPSS can give us charts, SPSS can give us graph. So same thing, Nvivo software can get us all this, just like SPSS. But doing it manually, doing it traditionally, this may not be possible. But nobody is saying it is wrong to use traditional method of doing qualitative analysis. It is just that a lot of things can go wrong, especially if you have large volume of data. If, for instance, you interview just 10 people, and each person spend about 45 minutes for the interview. By the time you transcribe a 45-minute interview, don't be surprised. It may be running to more than 10 pages. It may be running to 7 pages, 8 pages. It depends on how the person can talk. So imagine you have 10 pages averagely, multiply by 10, that's 100 pages. And to do analysis of 100 pages, traditionally, manually, may be very, very difficult. So that is why software are usually used where the data is large. So therefore, the traditional method of doing qualitative analysis have its own challenges, which necessitate most of the criticism that qualitative was subjected to until development of software. For instance, when we talk about traditional traditional method, we are talking about a kind of analysis that is very laborious, very labor intensive. It is very labor intensive in the sense that It takes a lot of energy, a lot of carefulness, a lot of accuracy not to miss some data. So after gathering the data, the researcher will transcribe the source material with a word processor. Maybe you type it, though you make multiple photocopy of the text. If it were to be with software, you don't need to make multiple copies. It is the soft copy that you transcribe, that you transfer to the software. It is the soft copy that you will be treating. So, but if it is traditional, you have to make multiple photocopy of the text. You have to painstakingly read through the assigned code to the material. The codes that you are putting by the side, I'm going to demonstrate, I'm going to show you. Then when we get to software also, we are going to do this thing again. So you have the code that you have generated, that you have done in the course of reading the text, you have to painstakingly read through, then make sure you assign each of the code to the statement that the code represents. Then you have to make sure you collapse all the codes as they are related, as I've explained before. In traditional way, the process of collapsing the code that are related before you group them is require cutting the page, cutting the pages up into coded passage. Then you manually sort the code. Maybe, for instance, look at this diagram. This is one of the traditional ways of doing the coding. Rather than in the software where you just code and you copy and you drag it and drop it, manually, traditionally, it means you see that you write out on a sticky paper. You write out each of the answer on a sticky paper, stick them to the wall or to the board, or you print and make photocopy, then you cut each statement and put them where they relate. Statement that is talking about impact of climate change on agriculture, maybe scarcity of food. You copy it, you cut it, then you drop it where you have maybe the basket for agriculture. You create another basket or another envelope or another wall where you're going to gum it. You create another wall for impact of climate change on earth, earth of the community. Then you look at the statements that relate to the source mentioning the impact on earth. You cut it, then you drop it there. Then again, on the impact on agriculture, you read again and see where somebody is talking about the impact on agriculture. You cut it, then drop it there. So this is how it will be done. So you can now imagine if you have as many as 100 pages, how easy, how possible to do all these cut and paste, or cut and gum, or cut and drop in the basket. So it becomes very, very laborious. That's why they refer to it as labor intensive. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of concentration before you can get this thing done traditionally. And no matter how careful you may be, some data will still be lost. That is why the one of the challenges we identified yesterday, which software was trying to solve, the challenges of reliability. Because by the time you are doing it traditionally, it is difficult to ensure reliability of the data. But with software, it can be done. So what you see stick to the wall here, you can see color pink. That color pink represents one categories of answers. Let's say, for instance, this color pink represent impact of climate change on agricultural food production. So these are the statements, these are the sources that we got, these are the code that we got that explain the impact on agriculture. We can take this yellow, to be the code we made that is talking about the impact on maybe health problem, health of the community. Maybe yellow are all the codes that are talking about health. We have to group them together. Then you have another one, orange. That orange could be that it is talking about scarcity of water. So we equally as caused by climate change. So we group them together. Either we group them in different baskets to be able to separate them, or you cut them and mark them, or you write on top of every cutting. This is for agriculture, this is for water, this is for health problem. So, or you use color, if it in this case of writing, like this researcher wrote out the answers on different sticky paper using different color. And it is this different color that are used to categorize into pattern the codes that have been done. So you, as you are seeing them, you can see that they are in pattern now. We can easily say all these are pink, all these are yellow, all these are orange, all these are blue. So that's a pattern we are talking about, which is done in selective coding. So each of these patterns can now be given a clear identity. This is impact of climate change on production of good of foods. Agriculture is still under agriculture. Impact of climate change on scarcity of water for domestic use and for agricultural use. We categorize them. The orange one, impact of climate change on the health of the community. A lot of people are falling sick on weekly basis. Their sickness is even restraining them from going to farm. So we can see that we have already created a pattern now, and we can be able to differentiate the color, using the color to differentiate. In some cases, it may be theme that we're going to use to differentiate them, because each answers will be grouped under a theme. So this is another example quickly of the traditional way of doing the coding at the analysis of qualitative. You can see this researcher simply mark out areas on the board and identify the theme of each of the area, then gum the answers to particular designated area. The paper that are gum are not specifically color sensitive. What the researcher is using to to pattern the answers, that's to categorize the answers in themes, are the marked area. He marked an area, he target resistance. That's the answer to resistance. He marked another area, he target knowledge. That's the answer to his question. Then type of teaching. Schools, which school are we talking about? Representation. Though these are 5 themes according to uh, the researchers. Maybe the research is about equality in education access. That is what the person is trying to get. So he has interviewed people. The people he interviewed are not much. From the way I'm looking at it, I don't think the maximum is more than 15 or 10. So, like in knowledge, for instance, only 4 codes were generated for knowledge, and that is all. It is 4. For type of teaching, we can see 5 codes were generated, and the 5 codes were gummed to type of teaching. So only 5 persons, or different code, 5 different code talks about different types of teaching. So this is how it is done traditionally. All these process of doing it traditionally have been seen to be problematic, have been seen to be creating problem of reliability. So with software, the problem of reliability is significantly reduced, because the process of doing the analysis is as simple as that of SPSS, where you just need to feed the data into SPSS. Then you ask SPSS to run a kind of analysis on a particular data. And SPSS will run it out within minutes and to give you the result. Same thing for qualitative too. But qualitative deal with words. SPSS deal with number. So that's the difference. And dealing with words and dealing with number determine the kind of analysis we are talking, determine the philosophy, determine the paradigm of doing the analysis. Yesterday, I talked about inductive, and I said inductive is usually seen as the best way to analyze qualitative research. And that is when the analysis begin from the bottom up. From the bottom up, it begins by gathering data. You go out, you gather data, then it is the data that will form the pattern. That is the coding, this open coding, the Asia coding, the selective coding. So the coding will form pattern. So the pattern are generated from the data you have collected from the field, not from anybody, not from theory, not from literature. From the pattern, you can come up with idea. Hypothesis is an assumption. Hypothesis is an idea. So it means idea of answers to your questions, answer to idea of a template that will serve as your contribution to body of knowledge, a template that will help a society to handle problem of a climate change, for instance, that will help the society to handle challenges, problems that usually lead to conflict and the destruction that usually come after conflict. So you come up with a theory or a model or a template that will be there to guide society on how to handle a problem. That's why we said qualitative is usually inductive. You build the analysis from the bottom, that's from the scratch, that is from the data, up, until you develop a theory. We said that qualitative is designed to develop theory, to come out with a particular findings that will serve as template, theory, or model that will guide society or contribution to knowledge. So deductive is top down, and that is the qualitative. That's quantitative for you. Quantitative begins from the top down to mere confirmation. So qualitative begin by going through theory, by looking at variables, by looking at how certain problem can be analyzed as discussed by theory. So it is the variable you have discovered from theory or from literature that you will now use, to determine your objective, to determine your research question, to determine your hypothesis, to determine your instruments. So instrument is what they refer to as observation. That's getting the data. So it is the observation, that's the data that you are trying to get, that you will now analyze. It is the answer, findings of that observation or data collection that will now confirm the theory. So quantitative is expected to come out to confirm what you have gone out to ask. To ask is a confirmation. That's why it is top down, while qualitative is a bottom up. But as well as deductive is specifically known with quantitative, it can also be borrowed, it can also be adapted for qualitative. It can also be used to do qualitative research, especially if the area you are looking at, maybe there are scholars who have worked on that area. You are trying to work on climate change, for instance. Before you set out, you discover that a lot of people have worked on climate change. They have identified the impact. So you can borrow the impact dimension they have identified. Then you now use the dimension to form your question, to take to the field. Then you now do your analysis based on the dimension you've already borrowed from theory. For instance, let's say we want to borrow deductive approach for our qualitative research. Our research is to know climate change on Africa. So that's the topic. That's the issue we are trying to look. So under that topic, climate change in Africa, we want to look at the impact of climate change in Africa. We want to look at the solution to impact of climate change. So if you now read maybe literature, when they say theory, they are referring to literature as well as a formal theory that we normally come across. So maybe from theory, you now discover that climate change impact are usually on agricultural food production, are usually on health of the citizen, maybe excessive sun or a kind of diseases coming out as a result of climate change. So we now borrow those dimensions. Maybe also again, somebody have already identified that another impact of climate change is on water, scarcity of water, scarcity of domestic water. So if all these have already been done, we can borrow it and take it to our qualitative, then raise question to ask our participant, what are the impact of climate change on water in your community? What are the impact of climate change on health of the community where you live? What are the impact of climate change on, I know that majority of you are agrarian farmers. A lot of you are subsistence farmers. So had there been any impact of climate change on your farming activities? So it means that we are borrowing that. That is what makes it deductive. We are deducting it from existing work, existing theory. We want to use it. You remember yesterday I said that the reason why qualitative has become inevitable or can become inevitable in some research is when there is immature studies, theory on that area. When there are no theory, when there are no work on that area, the area is short of material, is short of what? You can go strictly for inductive. If the theory that are available did not explain, you cannot get any dimension, you cannot get any variable that will help you, that will guide you into your qualitative research, then you go strictly for inductive. That means you go to the field, whatever you generate from the field will become the impact, because nobody has done anything about impact. But where theories have talked about the impact, where scholars have written journal, article, people have published on impact of climate change, we can borrow that and use. That will now become deductive and inductive approach. That means we combine both deductive and inductive to do our research. So deductive can also be used in some cases. But in the case of a research where qualitative is the major approach, major method, deductive cannot be used. It has to be inductive. But if it is a mixed method, for instance, it is a two-method research design where you want to bring in quantitative as well as qualitative, which is referred to as research, which is referred to as mixed method. Then you can, from your quantitative, the theory that you are using to guide your quantitative, you can borrow some dimension to guide your qualitative too. So that is how the analysis must be done. But you have to have it in mind before you set out that, okay, my analysis is strictly going to be inductive. If it is a PhD work, a master research work, and it is qualitative, scholars believe that it has to be strictly inductive. But if it is a research that you are combining two methods, you can borrow deductive. Or if it is qualitative alone, and a lot of people, trustworthy scholar, authority in that area, they have written something. They have identified solution to climate change. They have identified impact of climate change. All you need to do is just to deduct, that is borrow those dimensions, use them to guide your qualitative research. It is allowed also. As we are moving on, if you have any question, please, you can put them up in the chat box. I will see them, and possibly if it is a re-explanation you want me to make, I will make it. If it is clarification, maybe something is not clear, just put it in the box. I will attend to them as we are moving on. So this is another explanation on approaches in analysis. If the analysis is going to be deductive, using your research question to group the data and then look for similarity. So meaning that dimension that you already derive from theory, you use it to guide your research question. For instance, I said maybe that I work on impact of climate change. People have identified impact on agricultural food production, health, and water. So you can turn that to your research question if it is deductive. Use when time and resources are limited. When you don't have time, you can use deductive. All you need to do is just go to literature, go to theory, see what they have identified as the impact of climate change. Use them to form your research question for your participant. When they are back, all you need to do is look for answer to those questions which you borrow. So when there is limited resources and time, for no wasting of time, you can quickly use deductive. Use deductive when qualitative research is a smaller component of the larger quantitative study, meaning that you can use it when the qualitative aspect of your mixed method is just to complement the quantitative. If quantitative is your main research, you are only using qualitative to support, then you can use deductive, just as I've explained. Then inductive, use when qualitative research is the major design of the inquiry of your work. If your work is majorly qualitative, then you are to use inductive. Use use inductive if you are using emergent framework to group data and then look for relationship. You use inductive if your research is at higher level and you already have what you discover from the field, and from there you can read through and code, do the open coding. You can read through and collapse some of the code to derive share coding. You can now group all the codings into use selective approach to do coding, meaning that you can use your finding to form your framework. That is inductive. So you are encouraged. Now, we talked about stages of qualitative. Specifically, I talked about transcription the other time. That is the first stage. But in achieving that, the process is you have to read, verify, coding, come back again, read, verify. So it is a process of back and forth, front and back, go forward, come back, go forward, come back. You read and reread, read and reread, read and reread. That is what is expected of any researcher doing qualitative. You may not be able to get the accurate answer to your question when you read the first time, but when you read the second time, you are already trying to assume, trying to interpret what the statement is all about, to link to your research, to code. So after the transcription, you do data reduction. Data reduction is the coding. The process of doing coding is data reduction, because you are already reducing maybe entire paragraph. You can reduce it to 2 or 1 words to represent that paragraph. Sometimes entire page, 2 pages may be reduced to 2 words. You use 2 words to capture them. If everything the man said on the 2 pages are the same, saying the same thing, then you can reduce this thing to a code. Displaying the data. The second stage, the third stage of analysis is to display the data. That is into diagram, tables, and charts. So this can only be done if the software Nvivo is used. This stage 3 cannot be achieved if it is being done manually. Then the last stage is to triangulate to ensure you verify your data. There is no problem of reliability. We discussed that yesterday under the strategies to promote reliability, where we discussed about 7 strategies that can be used to ensure that your data are verifiable, they are reliable, and they are good for use. So moving on to start the coding we talked about. The best idea to do the coding or to do the analysis is to examine one question at a time. When you have the script, when you have the interview that you have transcribed, you read them. As you are reading them, make sure you start to read answer to question number 1, for instance. So make sure you read question number 1. across all your sources before you go to the second question. So it means that examine question 1 at a time. Read answer to question 1 in J1. Read answer to question 1 in W1. Read answer to question 1 in D1. So meaning that you have interview script from John. We said John is J1. You have interview script from William. We said William is W1. So number 3 person is Daniel, D1. So like that. John is J1, William is W2, Daniel is D3. So meaning you are giving them number up to the last that you did, maybe 20, up to maybe R20. So until you have all of them. So in doing the coding, you have to examine one question at a time. For J1, check the answer to question 1, read it, code it. When you are done with question 1, drop it. Take W2, read question 1, code it, drop it. Go to D3, read question 1, answer to in D3, code it. When you are done with all of them, you now come back to question 2. You start from J1 again, read question 2 of W1, W2, read question 2 of D2, D3, like that. That's what I mean by do the analysis by examining one question at a time. Then when you are doing the coding, you must consider the words used by the sources in the paper you are trying to code. Consider the words used. They are equally important. The usage of words sometimes can be a pointer to the answer the person is giving. Somebody who says that we are terribly in need of water, which is caused by climate change. Another person is saying that, well, climate change has impacted us. Our water is now scarce, though we are still having some. We are coping, but it is scarce. It's different from the first person who said we are terribly in need of water. So the way when you are coding, you have to be mindful of the words used by the source and try to code based on what the source is saying. Then consider the context under which the sources is talking. You recollect yesterday that we said when you are going to the feed to collect data, always ensure you go with feed notes. Feed note is the note where you record some non-verbal communication in. So by the time you are doing the analysis, you have to consider the context under which somebody is saying very terrible. They are in short of water terribly. So it means that note certain reactions of that person when he's expressing that. Some people may give to tears in the course of explaining that to indicate the essence of their suffering. So consider the context. The context also apply to the text you are trying to code. Look at the context, see the context in which the person is talking, the experience he has gone through. Somebody who just experienced impact of climate change only this year, the context in which he will be talking will be different from somebody who have been experiencing the impact of climate change since last 5 years. So the context in which each of them is talking, you have to take note of them because that equally determine the answers you are getting, the answers you are looking for. Then again, consider the internal consistency. Internal consistency is that when you are doing the coding, try to look at the pattern of their talk, Which area are they laying the emphasis? Is it on agriculture? Maybe agriculture affect them in so many ways. Shortage of food can lead to health problem. Shortage of food can lead to loss of job. Shortage of food can lead to crime. Maybe that emphasis is there when they are explaining the impact. So you are expected to look at the internal consistency of your sources when you are interviewing, when you are trying to read the paper. Then consider the specificity of responses. Because how specific are they? Try to consider it. Somebody may be talking and will be emphasizing a particular point. How often are they specific about a particular issue? So the specificity of the response on certain thing, try to note it. That also portends seriousness of something or how something is important to them. Because as a researcher, what you are looking for, qualitative researcher, you are looking for the in-depth feeling of these people, which you cannot determine through number. You are looking at their behavior, their perception, their feeling. So some of these things may not be dependent on words alone. So look at other things they are emphasizing, their reactions, their gesticulation, their non-verbal communication. All these sometimes need to be considered to know how important statements are. Then find the big idea. When you are doing decoding, ensure you are looking at the big idea. Big idea has to do with the overall finding that you are expected to identify. The overall finding. Maybe in a community, impact of climate change is not enormous. In another community, impact of climate change is very, very serious. They are in a dire need of help. And maybe your task as a person who is doing monitoring or doing evaluation, maybe donor agency they want to come out to support a community that is impacted on climate change. And before they set out, they must go out to do some monitoring, to do some evaluation. Maybe you are given the task of doing that evaluation or monitoring. So what the donor agency that is funding the work would need is the big idea. Where and how? What are the reasons that we have to go to a certain place? So the big idea is the extent to which these people need help, the extent to which the help that have been given to them in the past have not solved any problem. Maybe the extent that the rules set by government on industries that are emitting smokes, that are creating problem of climate change. Maybe the rules set out have not been working. So that is the big ideas that you should be looking for in your finding. As you are doing the coding, you are doing the analysis, you also must be taking notes to get the big idea, which is going to serve as your main contribution, which is going to serve as your main selling point. It's your main selling point to the donor agency, to if it is academic research, so that you'll be going to consider that. Then consider the purpose of the report. The purpose of the report is to identify where there is a problem, where you want to give solution. Maybe that's the purpose of the result. And that is usually the purpose of report of a sponsored research. If it is even some academic research that are sponsored through a scholarship, they may give an instruction that, okay, this research we are sponsoring, it has to be on a research that will examine the impact of climate change, because we want to know the extent of the impact. So know the purpose of the report. Some academic research, maybe it's just to identify some gap, do research, come out with objective, come out with contributions, come out with recommendation, submit and get your score and go. So the purpose of the research must be given consideration. So by the time we do all this, you're already forming a pattern. You're already forming an idea. You're already knowing the internal consistency. That is, things that are frequently mentioned. Frequency count in qualitative. So we're already knowing all this. So at the end of the day, our codings will now become a flow, and the flow will be in thematic analysis. By thematic analysis, it means that we begin from the quotes. Look at the bottom. That's qualitative usually begin from the bottom. It is the bottom, that's the quotes, that's the statement from the source that is referred to as quotes. So These codes, they are given a title, a name. That name is what they refer to as subtheme. For instance, we identify the impact of climate change. We identify health, we identify agriculture, we identify water. Maybe under health alone, maybe we have another dimension. Maybe under health, we have health of the baby is mostly affected. Maybe some people said health of the elderly who are vulnerable, they are the most affected. Maybe health of female, they are the most affected. So it affects their it affects their conceiving, their pregnancy and all that. So if we equally have this distinct dimension, we can now categorize everything about health. We can categorize it as one, then give it a sub-theme. Health impact of climate change. Under health impact of climate change as a sub-theme, we are going to have maybe the impact on health problem of children, of elderly, of women, female. So we group it that's the first sub-theme. Maybe the second sub-theme is a health problem, impact on agriculture. And when they say agriculture, in which area of the agriculture? Maybe it only affects subsistence farmers that are only doing farming just to feed the immediate family. Maybe the large scale farmer who have introduced irrigations, maybe they are not affected so much. So we need to equally identify these categories of impact and group them under agricultural impact, impact of climate change on agriculture as a sub-theme that is going to be the title to capture all the impacts identified on agriculture, a sub-theme that will capture all the impacts on health. So at the end of the day, theme one, which is at the top, will now be the impact of climate change. Theme one is impact of climate change. Sub-theme, the first sub-theme to the left will now be impact on Earth. And what are those dimensions of impact on Earth? We have them where they write quote. Then the second sub-theme under theme one will be impact on agriculture. Which dimension of agriculture it is impacted? So all of them now move up to answer theme one, which is impact of climate change. The same thing, theme two, solution. So how did we get to arrive at solution? Sub-theme one, solution in agriculture, solution in water, solution in agri. So this is the flow that I refer to as thematic analysis. The coding we were explaining the other time, this is a sample of how coding can be done. This is one example. Let's assume this is a test. You are reading the test. As you are reading the test, you are given a code by the right hand side. When you read the test, you can underline it, you can highlight it, or in the case of traditional, it will be cut out and it will be dropped where, or you write at the back of it or on top of it, age contrast. Then when you are reading again, you came across residence focus. You are going to identify it, you are going to mark it out as code. So the code you have to the right are short words that captured what the people are saying in the text that you are trying to analyze. So this process is what they call coding, and it is one of the backbone. It is fundamental in qualitative. Coding is a very important aspect that must be done rightly. If coding is not done rightly, the finding will be affected, because this is where the answer can be derived. This is where the contributions can be derived. Even the model, the graphical model that is going to be derived, this is where they are going to be derived. So everything boils down to the code. So it means we have to understand the process of coding. We have to understand how to code. After the coding, what we are seeing here is open coding. We are just reading and we are dropping the coding. We are reading, we are dropping the coding. So at the end of this open coding, we'll now do the second level of coding. Second level of coding will now be referred to as Ashare coding. That Ashare coding is where you are collapsing all this code into how they are related. Those ones that are related, you bring them together. Those ones that are not related, you leave them and group them where they belong. So at the end of the day, you are going to form a pattern. As you are collapsing this coding, you'll be seeing that you're already getting answer to your question. So by the time you get to selective coding, where you are grouping them, just as we have here, by the time you do the coding, you do the selective coding, you're already having subtheme. You already group all the finding about Earth under subtheme. You're already grouping all the subtheme under agriculture in another one. So you're already linking all your finding to one theme, which is impact of climate change. So under subtheme, we see the headings that you use to capture all the findings that are related. For instance, in this code, we have 3 codes on the theme 1 to the left. The 3 codes can be the impact on agriculture. Then we head it with a subtheme. We title impact on agriculture. So this is how it will be done when you are doing the selective coding. So the process of doing it, theoretically, we have explained. The process of doing it traditionally, we have explained. So by our next discussion will be done in the next, that's tomorrow, will be on the software. Or we'll first of all do another coding again. Maybe I will take you through another process of coding again. I will bring a test that we're going to code on the screen. Theoretically, that we're going to see how we are coding, how we are getting the codes. Then before we now move to the software, because operating on the software is very easy if you have understood this process of coding. So at this stage, I want to introduce us to Nvivo briefly. With the time we have left, I want to introduce us to Nvivo. What is Nvivo? What are the process of Nvivo? But before doing that, let me check some of the questions that I have in the chat box to see which I can easily answer now. Somebody said, Mr. Williams said, I can see from this explanation of deductive and inductive approaches that project evaluation are more deductive than inductive, even when they are qualitative, considering that the theory are already provided in the project design and later as evaluation question. Yes, you are right to some extent, Mr. William. You are very right, but to some extent. Not, not all projects are given mandate on the specific thing to do. There are projects that you'll be given the privilege and open check to go and check what is the problem. There could be problem in some society, maybe conflict. There was a time in Kenya after election, there was conflict where many people died. Same thing in Uganda. After election, many people died. Is it just about election? If it is election, how come? So you can ask to go and do an evaluation and see what is behind the conflict aside the election. Because even after election, we are still experiencing conflict. Some community are still going into conflict even after election when there is no election. So what is the underlying fact, underlying incident, or underlying reason for their conflict? That's an open check. You don't have anything to guide you. You are to go. So it is in the course of your interview that you will be discovering what are the underlying causes of conflict during election, outside the election. So sometimes the inductive can be used even for monitoring and evaluation that you make reference to. But sometimes maybe The study is a continuation of the one done before. So if, for instance, evaluation, we know evaluation is when probably a project of action have already been executed, something have been introduced. Our own is to find out. Our own is to determine. Our own is to measure, to know the impact of that project that already been carried out. So your evaluation will be deductive in that case because you will have known the areas you want to evaluate. You will have known the areas that have been area of projects that are already existing that you want to check. So in that case, deductive may be suitable, right? Now, let me to answer Mr. William further, let me narrate a story relating to project evaluation. There was a community in Nigeria where some non-governmental organization felt that there was a disease called guinea worm. Guinea worm is a river disease, is a water disease, a waterborne disease. A community that is subjected to unclean water, stream water, they usually have this guinea worm that affect their body, and ordinarily it's supposed to have been eradicated. So this non-governmental organization, being sponsored by one international agency, supported the NGO to eradicate guinea worm in Africa. So they went to this community where they usually experience guinea worm. So they went there, they knew that, okay, fine, the problem is guinea worm. And by theory, by our understanding, guinea worm is caused by problem of water. So without asking any question, they knew that they've concluded that water is the solution to these people's problem. So they gave them water. They dug borehole for them. So they now have running water, believing that in 6 months, in 1 year, this problem will have been eradicated. So after some months, they came back for evaluation to see. When they are coming back for evaluation, they came with close mind that our evaluation is to focus on eradication of guinea worm, the impact of the water giving them on the elimination of guinea worm. That's the objective of the evaluation. Impact of water provided on the eradication of guinea worm. Now, they went to the community, they still found them seriously in problem of guinea worm. So they were surprised. How come? Why are you people still having guinea worm? So some of them, in the course of they have to open their mind to more findings. So that means they have gone inductive. They went with deductive mindset. So they got there, they have to open their mind to different answers. So in the course of interviewing them, they got to know that the leader, the king of that community, instructed that nobody should use that water. That they started using the water after some time. Order was given that nobody should use the water again. In their own traditional, in their cultural form. We talked about ethnography yesterday, studying people's culture, why people behave in certain way. So why the king said you should not use the water again? The king said the community concluded that the water is evil. It is evil water. That's why they asked them not to go near it. What makes it evil water? They said, so in the course of digging, I said yesterday again that there's some issues that you cannot do in a focus group. Responses will not come. So they now break down into groups. They now identify leaders among the community. They subjected them to a secluded area and were interviewed. What are the reasons? So the answer that was given was so funny and at the same time important, which these people failed to take note of because they went with deductive approach that you're having guinea worm, solution to guinea worm is water. But they didn't use the water. Why? They said initially when the water was provided, they were using it. But they discovered that families are having more problem in addition to their guinea worm. Problem of conflict, problem of conflict, couples conflict, problem of a marital problem. Why? They said in the course of digging down, they said number one, in the past, when they usually fetch water in the stream, it is a problem of the children in the house, you know, going as far as maybe kilometers away, 1 hour to go, 1 hour to return in fetching water for the family to use. But it was whenever they went to look, when the children went to look for water, the husband and wife usually have time for themselves as couple to have usual affairs that will turn to pregnancy, that will turn to having baby. The usual couple's life. So, but since because they use each family use one small hut, one small a room apartment where the family, the father, the mother, the children, all of them live. So only when the children move to the stream, that will take them about 2 hours, that couple have time. So it has become their tradition. So, but when this water was constructed, it is at the heart of the community, very close to all of them. Community, a village where all of them are surrounded within a stretch of voice voice command. Somebody can hear another person from another place. So now that the water is constructed and it's convenient for them around the place to fetch water, so within minutes, children will have gone, fetch water, return home. So you see, I said it looks funny, it sounds funny, but sometimes it is cogent as a reason. So because of that, couple usually have problem. They don't have their privacy, they don't have their time again, and it is leading to problem. So as far as that is concerned, the community concluded that it is that water in their own narrow mind. It is that water that is creating the problem. So the water is evil. They should not go near it. So they return back to their stream to fetch water. That's why guinea worm continue. So when the NGO made that evaluation, it was inductively discovered, not deductively. Deductive was that we've given them water, problem will have been solved. Let's go and find out how they are feeling now. But they got there and met different answer. So they opened their mind to new discovery, and they discovered that. So they have to go and re-strategize and come back with another plan to solve the problem. And what is that solution? To get them more houses. They need houses, maybe two-room apartment where children can live separately from the couple, from the parents, and everybody will have its time. They can go for 5 minutes to fetch water. The couple will still have their time in their room. So you see, as unimportant as it looks to us in the city, these are issues with people in the rural area. So when coming for evaluation, monitoring, or projects, a lot of things should be considered. That is why inductive is usually encouraged, because through inductive, you will be open to many answers that you may not even envisage. You may be open to many answers that theory cannot envisage. That's why we said yesterday that when theories are inadequate, it can affect the research if you stick to the theory that is not addressing your problem. So the template of the Western world is that guinea worm is caused by water. Solution to guinea worm is provision of good water, but it is not solving the problem here. So meaning that that theories of water, clean water for guinea worm does not work. So that's why qualitative sometimes expect inductive to handle some things. So that is to Mr. William. To Mr. Nkenyi, you said something that I have learned that is very vital is coding a question for all the participants before moving to the next question. Yes, exactly like that, Mr. Nkenyi. It helps a lot. Then Mr. Mudimba said, I think evaluator may mix inductive and deductive without properly soliciting appropriate question. Yes, this is where evaluators should now rest the evaluation design and determine what is it the project sought to impact? Yes. Test the evaluation design. Yes, that's this observation of Mr. Mudimba is like a reinforcement of the story I just told you now. An evaluator should test the evaluation design and see how viable, how relevant, how useful, and how adaptable to that society. Thank you, Mr. Um, Mudimba, for that observation. Yes, Mr. William again. Okay, makes sense. Thank you. So these are the issues about it. So now the Nvivo. Let's move into Nvivo. Let's do an interface. Let's see the interface of Nvivo before we move into Nvivo, maybe tomorrow. So that nothing will be strange to us. The interface of Nvivo has to do with Nvivo can help us. What can we use Nvivo for? We can use it to organize our data, unlike in the traditional way. Nvivo can help us organize our data in a perfect form. In a perfect form. It can help us analyze and find insights into unstructured or qualitative data like interview. Yes, insights, a lot of insight will be discovered because the problem of loss of data will not arise. That is number one. Number two, the multitude of data will be handled properly. Then open-ended survey question even can be handled in Nvivo. You know, sometimes when you give out questionnaire, you set some area as open-ended. That open-ended cannot be captured by SPSS unless you code it in number. If, for instance, you ask a certain question and the answer you give it number one, any other answer different from that, you give it number two. Any other answer different from that, you give it number three. So you can only reduce them to three, but still a lot of things will be missed out if they have to be converted to number. So Nvivo can help to transcribe audio and video when a particular subscription is made on Nvivo. It can be used. It speed up coding process. It guarantee reliability of research. Then it allow reliability of research that we discussed yesterday. Software Nvivo can guarantee it, because what scholars usually complain about qualitative is the reliability. So the coming of the software guarantee that. Then they said traceability of your analysis, important for Viva. For those of you who are doing academic research, when you do your analysis in the software, you can always go back to it, especially if you have access to it, and redo and reconvert and do all the correction that will emanate from the Viva. Designed to handle large volume of data. Yes, it is designed to handle large volume, which ordinarily cannot be done manually. Then finally, it allows modeling of findings. So it gives us the opportunity of presenting the findings in a graphical form, which will make it easy to understand, right? So Nvivo can be used again for interview, focus group discussion, ethnography, content analysis, grounded theory, literature review. That's the new addition to the software. It can be used for literature review. So then the key terms in Nvivo that we need to understand is that analysis. When we say analysis, as we talked about, is the process of identifying the codes, interpreting them into themes in order to answer our research objective or research questions. Codes are words or a word or short phrase or chunk of text that captures the responses of informant in the data. That's what code is all about. Then coding is the process of identifying and assigning meaning to data. That's the process of doing the coding, is of identifying the code is what we refer to as coding. Then themes that come when we collapse all the codes to form a meaningful statement or to see a pattern. That's what we refer to as theme. So theme is pattern in data that emerge from codes bringing together codes to make meaning. That is what we refer to as theme. So every qualitative research must come out to become theme that will really explain what we are saying. In quantitative too, by the time you code the questionnaire, you input them into the SPSS, you do the analysis will be brought out, maybe in terms of significance, which of the hypotheses is significant, which one is not significant, and other things. So nodes is one of the things in Nvivo that works like a bin, like a basket, where you are dropping each of the codes as they relate, where you are dropping them. It's like a bin. You remember the other time today, I showed you the traditional way where somebody draw a cycle on the board, then it stick all the codes as they relate in each circle. So that circle is like a bin, it's like a basket where you are dropping all the code in. So where code are gathered is referred to as node. You are going to see the process. Then the source. Source is the document that have been imported into Nvivo for analysis. The first thing to be done is to bring all the interview we have transcribed, import them into the software to begin the analysis. The same way we do for in SPSS, you input all the findings from the questionnaire, you input them into the SPSS. So the same thing, we input the document into the software. That is the source. Now, Nvivo, this is an interface of Nvivo. Nvivo, the process, the workings of the Nvivo. We import, that's the first. You can see that's the maybe I can call it brown or red. Import. That's the first thing we do in Nvivo. When you bring the interview, the document into the Nvivo, that is import. That's the first thing. Followed by explore. Exploring means you open those interview, you read them to explore the pattern, to explore the ideas people are presenting. Then this thing you explore, you begin by coding them. As you are reading, you'll be coding. As you are reading, you'll be coding. So, which we have explained. Then query is the next in Nvivo, which is checking what you have coded, see the pattern. Then you can begin to, you now reflect on them. As you reflect on them, you now gather them to become a pattern, a themes. Then you can visualize. Visualize means you can display your finding in a visual form, in a graphical form, right? Then memo is record your insights, your write-up, bring it up as a report, which is the last thing we are going to do on our last day. Then this is another workspace of Nvivo, interface of Nvivo. Nvivo is like this. When you open it, the page is like this. If you look at the top left, there's a ribbon. That is where you can locate all commands. Any guide, anything you don't understand, help can come from there. You can get to know everything you want to. You can ask questions, you'll be answered. So then on the bottom of it, we saw one icon, navigation. That is where the file, where you want to import the document. That's where you want to import them, where you can import them, you can keep them for save. These are files. Then below it, which you are going to see further, let me open it in the head. This is the interface in a bigger form now. This is where you go. When you click the file, you will see some of the things you can do, the recent work you have done. That's where your license, you can always check it. So then we have this. This is where you can bring in, this is a file where you can keep those files, those interviews you are bringing. This is where you can keep them. And what are the things you can bring into the file? You can bring in PDF, it allows it. You can bring in Microsoft Word, you can bring in audio, you can bring in video, you can bring in pictures, you can bring in even data set from survey, you can bring it into Nvivo for analysis. So all of them are acceptable. You will demonstrate all this. I'm only showing you the interface first. Then we have the sources. These sources you are seeing, that is where all the interview you have transcribed, which you have categorized into name of the sources, J1, W2, D3, R4, up to the last, P6. That's the code you give the source. You don't mention the name. If a source is called Peter, you can use Peter because many people bears Peter. Nobody can know the Peter you're talking about, but you don't use the surname, especially when the issue is sensitive. So the identity of the source, as in quantitative too, you don't use identity, you use number to represent each case, each participant. So sources. You remember we talked about node the other time. We said node is like a basket where you keep the codes you are doing, where you are keeping them as they are related. The code that has to do with earth impact, everything that relates to earth impact, you drag them into that place. Anything that relates to agriculture, you drag it into another basket. All these are inside the node, different files of health impact. All the codes about health, they are in the file. All the codes about agriculture, they are in the file. So all of them are kept in the nodes. All of them are kept in the node where you can go there to do the analysis. Classification is like a demographics of the participant, which you can do. Collection is where all your analysis you are doing, they are kept there. You can check them, you can copy them. Query is checking what you are doing, seeing the pattern. You can, the interview you have imported to the sources, which you have coded, you can check the pattern of your code. You can see the frequency, which statement is more mentioned in the coding, so that the big idea can come. When you check, when you query your analysis, you query your code, you can have ideas of what is the most mentioned, what is the frequently mentioned statement or impact, so that will give you the big idea of where the main problem is. Then model is where the page, the place where you can do the graphics, the graphical display of your findings. You can do model, you can do charts, you can do graph that will support your analysis. Because now, most publication now, looking at qualitative, they expect that your qualitative should not just be all words from page 1 to the last page, words. They want you to support it with a diagram. They want you to support it with a graphical content that will show the relationship between your findings, just as the one I showed you the other time that indicate code, then subtheme, then theme. We can see the relationship, then we can see the differences, then how they come together to form a team. That is where they have related. So the model can give you all that. Then we have the folder containing all the works. So after you have imported all the sources into the software, this is how each of them can be. You can click on them, check what you have coded. If you need to code again, click on it, you can recode. Even after you have finished the coding, you are doing the analysis, and you discover that possibly, especially if it is deductive, and you have identified something deductively that are likely be the answer. And by the time you finish the coding, you discover that nobody answered this this dimension. Nobody answered this deductive dimension you have brought. Nobody talked about water scarcity as one of the impact of climate change. But in the theory, in the literature you read, they said water is one of the great problems. So, and by the time you check your code, you did not see anybody mention water. So you can decide to go back and recheck, double check. Maybe your coding you did not read, you did not interpret properly. Maybe somebody mentioned it indirectly, partially, which is not obvious. So, and in the course of your coding, you have to know that you have to go with coding with mindset. There are obvious statements. They call it explicit statement that will mention the thing clearly. Then there are latent, which the meaning will be hidden. So it is your responsibility. That is why you are the instrument. It is your responsibility to check and see what that person is actually saying. That is where the interpretative approach comes in. It is your duty to look at what they are saying, interpret it appropriately. So if it's possible you have mixed out, you can come back, click and redo. So that is another advantage of the software. You can visualize your project in a display of charts. You can visualize your project in a model like this. You can visualize your project in a model like this. This is a model visualizing the findings, the research idea, the themes, as well as the findings. For instance, look at the one in the middle, catalyst for ethnic conflict behavior. That is the objective of the research. The research want to know the catalyst. What are the causes? What are the reasons? What are the things that propel ethnic conflict behavior? That is what the study is all about. So in the course of doing it, the study discovered that, look at the one in pink, the study discovered that the way newspaper frame their story can cause problem, especially during election, sensitizing, raising alarm unnecessarily. It causes conflict. Then look at the green. The green said government failure also lead to conflict. Then attitude of ethnic groups fighting each other after election, especially when somebody from your ethnic group failed or was not elected, lost out, they turn to fight. So attitude of ethnic groups need to be examined because they cause conflict also. Then domination. If even before the election or after the election, one ethnic group seem to be dominating the other, maybe by virtue of having access to power, that also leads to conflict. Then electioneering activities, that is as it affects election. Everywhere, election is usually volatile. Even in America, where they claim they have the most perfect democracy, the most foolproof democracy, it was proving wrong. That they were proving wrong that your democracy sometimes can be can be can be in crisis, just as we do experience in Africa. And that was what we experienced in January 6th when followers of Trump's were mobilized to Capitol and desecrated the place. So these are the findings. So look at the pink again, newspaper framing. You can see how newspaper is causing ethnic conflict were identified through decoding. In decoding, one coding identify inciting reports. When reports incite, it leads to conflict. We remember what happens in Rwanda sometimes ago in the early 90s, where genocide happens as a result of the role media play in inciting one ethnic group, Tutsi and Hutus, how media incited crisis. So ownership interest also matter. Double standard. When you tag one group as terrorist, you tag one group as a freedom fighter. So media contribute to conflict through this. Name calling. What happened in Rwanda? One of the way media contributed is through name calling, by identifying some people as cockroaches, cockroach, wherever you see cockroach, kill it, this language. So government failure, corruption, poverty, and other. So all these, as you're finding, can be displayed in a graphical form that will help. If you have ever come across some of the UN reports, when UN sponsored a project, maybe monitoring, evaluation, research, the reports, the qualitative aspects, they will display the findings, especially the executive summary they normally give. They will display the finding to give a summary of what they have discovered. So let's see if there are questions, so that by tomorrow we are going to begin by importing file into Nvivo. We begin by importing file into Nvivo. We import file, we the data sources we can bring into Nvivo. Then we are going to look at this semantic and latent approach, the process of coding, where you have to look for explicit statement and latent statement. We're going to talk about them tomorrow by the grace of God. So far, some comments that I have here. Yes, Mr. Williams said, thanks very much. The example make it clear. I can now see that the inductive approach is what can lead easily to new knowledge. Very good. You captured it very well. New knowledge. Who has entered the class? Okay, Mr. Peter said that. Then any other observation, question, you can raise it within the remaining minutes we have left to have our 2 hours complete. Let's raise questions so that by tomorrow, by God's grace, we run through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We run through just 5 slides, then straight away moving to Nvivo to demonstrate what we have been discussing. By tomorrow, we are going to import files into Nvivo. Practically, we're going to import it. And how we do the importing, we're going to do it. The sources we can import into Nvivo, as I've said, we can import Microsoft Word document, PDF, data sets, audio and video sources, pictures. All these can be imported into Nvivo for our analysis. So any questions that we have, let's raise it. You can unmute your audio for questions and observation as you may want to have it. Whoever has questions to ask can unmute his audio for specific questions and interactions.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
William.
Yes, Mr. William.
Yes, I just typed a question there.
Okay,
I think it's very interesting what we're hearing today.
Okay.
I think the session has been really interesting and very relevant to the work I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm sure it's going to help me very well.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm just asking a very quick question there.
Okay, yes, I can see the question. Yeah, you are using Apple Mac. Yes. Nvivo, there is a Nvivo for Apple. There are Nvivo for Windows, right? But the link I usually send are for Windows. Though there are for Apple, but I will try to check tomorrow if I can lay my hand of the free trial for Apple so that I send it to you. Possibly because all this while we have been using Microsoft Windows. We have been using Windows for our practical sections. So that's why I have not taken it as a need to get Apple version. But there are, every time the product is released like that, software, they will produce that of Windows, they will produce that of Apple. So I don't have it now, but I will check if I can lay my hand on the free copy for MacBook, Mr. William. Maybe only because the rich use Apple. That's why, Mr. William. So any other question, observations? You can unmute your mic.
Yes, Doc. Good evening.
Mr. Sin.
Is it?
Elafus. How do I pronounce your name?
No, please. Let me, there's something wrong with my account. I'm Rene.
Okay.
Something wrong with my account.
Okay.
Anyway, let me just ask the question before I check my account to my personal account. Okay. You made mention of the inconveniences for using the traditional analysis method.
Yes.
Are there any advantages of using that traditional method over the software?
The software. Well, in everything, there must be advantage, no matter how little it may be. The only advantage I can mention is the fact that you become more close to your work. You get to understand, you get to know it, because in the process of it's like somebody who is asked to copy a note. In the process of copying, you are reading also, compared to somebody who is making photocopy. So the process of doing it traditionally, you are writing out every codes. So that process makes you to be more closer to your findings than than uh, software. So that's the only advantage I can say for now. But it has more of disadvantages than advantages. Well, if I say that the another advantage is that you are not likely, if especially if your system has problem of virus which can attack system. If it is traditional, well, you can always dust your file and bring them out again and check. Maybe only that. Only that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay. Yes, I hope Mr. Peter will share the link to you, so that whoever can install will install it and follow up tomorrow. But no, don't worry if you can't get it, especially Mr. William. If you can't get it installed tomorrow, don't worry. Follow up my explanation, follow up my demonstration. Later, by God grace, I'll get it and send to you later. So whoever that cannot install, just follow up, because sometimes follow me doing it is easier and very easy to learn than when you are distracted by your process of doing it yourself, because the video is going to be available. So anytime you want to do it on your own, you can always follow the steps on the video and the explanation we are giving on the video and do it. So even the best way is you can install it, but try to see my own demonstration of it. That will then later you can now work it out. So Mr. William, no cause for alarm. You will get it later. Follow the description, the training, and let's see how we can get it later. Thank you. Yes, Mr. or Miss Dacha. Yes, the free trial will be given by Mr. Peter or myself as well. Mr. Peter will send it to the platform or send it to your mail. I think he promised to send it to your mail, and I'm sure he will send it to your mail. Even if you find it difficult to install, just keep on following our training, our discussion. We're going to get around it. Okay, you're welcome, Mr. or Miss. Is it Miss or Mr. Dacha? Thank you.
Not Mr. Please.
Oh, I've heard you, Miss or Mrs. I've heard you. Thank you. Sorry, madam. Okay, you're welcome, madam. Mr. Nkenyi.
Yes, please, Doc.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I am just checking to make sure it's my account, because the other account, I use some other person account to do some kind of connection. So I didn't switch to my own account.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yes, so thank you so much for the presentation. And I can't wait to get to the next day so that I undergo through this presentation.
Okay.
The only challenge that I have is I have been trying to install
Okay.
But I'm failing. It would say install, but when I try to open, I can't see anything.
Oh.
Hopefully, I'll be able to install tomorrow.
Okay, you will, Mr. Mudimba. You will surely. Yes, the volume is the megabyte is high, close to about 500 megabytes. So don't worry, you get to have it sync done, and you can later install it and try it on your own, following the video also. So no problem, no cause for alarm. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye. Everybody, bye bye. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye bye, sir. Bye bye,
Bye.
sir. Bye bye, sir. Have a great night. My
Thank you.
regards to everybody. Yes.